I'm Alien Magma-Boulder III, and today we're going to talk about the first major American Ultraman and Godzilla, that being 1993's Ultraman Powered, and then 1998's Godzilla, and... Not you. Magma, you dumbass. It's my episode 2. Didn't you forget? Of course you did. You're an insolent buffoon. This is also a Godzilla channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Just remember, every day is a tokusatsu day. The sweet taste of destruction. Or just alcohol. But it helps an alien invader like myself get through some of these videos. Today I'm going to talk about my half of this topic, that being the first major American Godzilla. You probably know it because if you're watching videos like this, you're an expert like I am, Godzilla fans. And when you know it, I'm talking about Godzilla 1998, directed by Roland Emmerich and produced by Dean Devlin, the one of Matthew Broderick and John Reno. But this film is pretty legendary for all the wrong ways. Now, I'm not going to reiterate too much on its history or the actual film's story because you've already seen it. You know this. The story's been told since 1998. But, and for my buddy Magma, in order to explain this history of the Godzilla franchise alongside its contemporary brother, the Ultraman series, well, Godzilla 98, has it aged well? No. Has not. It has not aged well like the best of alcohols. Instead, it's kind of fallen flat. And even rewatching it with keeping my nostalgia for it intact, there's a lot of moments of this 1998 film that just don't really hit me the same anymore, even as a monster flick. Now, when it comes to Ultraman Powered, what are my general feelings of it? Because this isn't going to be like a grand retrospective or really a big history of just an analysis of it in conjunction with its Godzilla contemporary of that same decade. And for Ultraman Powered as a series, as an alien Magma myself, well, I gotta say, it just doesn't stick the landing, if you will. And just, it all comes down to a very messy, troubled production between this American company and Super I at the time, Super I Productions. And what we ultimately end up with is an American Ultraman show that doesn't really understand the whole aspect of tokusatsu, what makes it great. But I don't really want to give them that much of a, negative aspect to that. More so just how, with no experience on how to properly bring tokusatsu to life, then the results aren't going to be that much great. It's not going to yield a great cinematic experience, because Ultraman is all about bringing that cinematic tokusatsu kaiju action experience to the smaller screen and the television. And as a whole, Ultraman Powered, from just the fights, the choreography, and the implementation of additional special effects like scaling and beam weaponry and other cool effects, it just doesn't hit. It feels cumbersome. Sure, the action, the helicopter fight, and what little we get of that submarine fight in the, not very true to its name, Hudson River. My good friend of mine, Parker, really doesn't like this Hudson River fight. If you've ever seen it, you know the Hudson River is not deep enough to hold submarines or Godzilla. But I can kind of just look at these fights as, well, they may be highlights of the film, kinda. But honestly, from all the human scenes to just the origin of Godzilla in this film, his presentation, even the cool, I'll give this some credit, it's cool 90s aesthetic of the raid, and New York being a different time since it was the late 90s. Yeah, that's pretty cool, even without nostalgia. I like the aesthetic of this film, and I like the overall soundtrack, and even the tie-in album, except for the main end-credit song by a certain guy who's probably worse than any of these alien invaders like myself. You know who he is. Anyway, the only cool part about that ending song is the little verse by, I think his name was Jimmy Page, was it? You know the part. That's the only good part of the song. That whole song should have been Jimmy Page. Overall, Godzilla 1998, in terms of history of Godzilla, as his first big blockbuster film in Hollywood, does size matter? Well, Not really, as apparently in this film all you need are missiles to take down Godzilla, which is a real shame since he actually kinda outsmarted the military twice with the helicopters and the submarine. If they kept letting Godzilla use his intelligence, that would have been pretty cool, and they given him more for brute force, and well, maybe this film would have been just alright. In terms of presentation, sure, Totopoulos, the artist of the film, did a cool job of Godzilla as a creature. I like the dorsal plates and the skin pattern, and you know, it fits with the 90s brand aesthetic of New York, and there's the 90s, bit of a 90s grunge, I guess. But all the normal Hollywoodisms really take this film down. It's ultimately a lack of care for the source of material, and you've probably heard that, but I'll tell you my own perspective. As Magma's been talking about with Ultraman Powered, yeah, both of these series, whether it's Ultraman Powered or Godzilla 98, probably did a different approach of keeping the artist designs, you know, intact, since Ultraman Powered at least had one of the Japanese designers for the monster suits, except the monsters couldn't do jack shit in their fights. It's very limited, in addition to maybe the stunts not having the best experience in how to perform in a tokusatsu fashion. And when we look at Godzilla 98, yeah, they kind of did use a suit for some scenes of Zilla in New York, so there's some cool miniatures like the Chrysler building getting destroyed, or Madison Square Garden, real highlights. However, even as the film does a cool job showing that the US military is often destroying more than the monsters themselves, in context of a Godzilla film, I kinda expected more. Because when you think of Godzilla, you want him to actually fight back. And surprisingly, years later, even in the Monsterverse, we don't really get that of Godzilla in humanity. Sure, he might destroy a whole city off-screen in the new empire, that being like Rome and parts of Spain and France. We're never see Godzilla fighting anything but mindless military drones. I don't mean that in soldiers, I mean that in just actual, like, modern-day drones. And so the Monsterverse even from 2014 never really fought the military. I wish he did. It just kind of takes him off. But we need a middle ground. If the Monsterverse Godzilla never really fought the military, they thought they need to, and that's the Godzilla that got hit with the most atomic bombs of any creation, so I think he had every right to attack humanity and still save the day from other kaiju. Then you look at Zilla, and well, Zilla, he kind of just runs around. He has, like I said earlier, some pretty cool scenes outsmarting the military, and he does stomp on a few tanks, which is nice, but he doesn't really do any more Godzilla-isms than that, beyond being a big lizard, which is surface level at best. Now, to give the series some credit, the suit designs and how they actually look is phenomenal. They look great, although I think I prefer some designs a lot more. I'm not a big fan of Jamila in this show, and I don't even like Cumular that much, or Bolton. I think some of the designs could use a bit more tweaking that kind of work from the original art style from the artists of the show that they were trying to implement and bring to real life. And as for this Ultraman incarnation, Ultraman Powered, he's alright. I like his design for the most part. You know, he's one of those other kind of variations of the original Ultraman, but kind of like how Ultraman Great was just a different twist and a different continuity, even though I think they all come from the same land of light. I don't really think Great and Powered are some of my favorites, even from the designs and their movesets. Although, at least Great had his like weird arm, kind of revolver laser things, and some hand laser beam swords, and a little other few abilities that are kind of unique, along with his color scheme being white and red instead of silver and red. But for Powered himself, he's even more connected to the original Ultraman as a kind of a big homage. That being, he fights all of his original foes, or at least around 13 to 15 of them amongst this 13 episode run. That's including all the other kaiju that appear in some of the episodes, like Pigmons. And I just believe that as a whole, the show, while I like how they brought some of these Showa designs to a new 90s aesthetic, and some of the more popular fan, like, request, I guess, like making Red King actually red. I gotta say, sure, the designs look nice, but the suit actors, the stuntmen, and the overall camera work from the directing, choreography, and the way the special effects were implemented. And let's be real, the actual sets they're fighting on, they don't really mesh well together. Like, I think all the fights that are shot in an outside setting, and I can't remember if it was California or the Arizona desert in Utah, wherever they filmed the show. The outside settings and the natural lighting, it looks nice on the kaiju, but when you get those actual nighttime fights in like an actual set, how these American cities are fighting in. When you have Winter, which is the strike team of the show, Winter, and they're helping Ultraman. I mean, I don't know, sometimes the actual aircraft they use looks nice, and of course they just use normal jeeps for their vehicles. A lot of the normal military stuff looks alright. But like that first fight, the first impression the show makes, right, to compare it to Godzilla 98. Like, sure, 98 kind of had a decent setup of Godzilla from the ship attack, and his first reveal in New York during the overcast setting and the cameraman scene. That's alright, but then you get to the actual fight in the cities and really kind of look cool with that 90s aesthetic. Those don't really hit the mark of what you want from this character, and that applies to Ultraman Power as well. The first pilot episode is a decent setup of our protagonist, Kai, going to space and getting the power of Ultraman powered. But I gotta say that, when you get to the actual fights, that episode of the Balton invasion, man, is it pretty rough. I don't remember it looking that rough, but going back to it, wow. Just compare that to the first fights of Balton in the Showa era. Like, it's night and day, man. Even if you compare the flying fight from episode 2 of the original Ultraman of Balton to the fight we get here at Powered. Oh, wow. Just awkward. And I think some of the background music of the show doesn't really help either. It gets a bit repetitive, but that's just me. And we look at the way Powered fights with his hand movements. It's, you know, I think in a better choreographed show I would have liked that fighting style. But here it just looks a bit awkward. And even the way Ultraman stands doesn't feel as mighty as his Showa contemporaries. Because remember, this is really before Tiga died on Gaia. So we haven't even gotten to Ultraman returning to Japan quite yet. This is still just 1993. You know, after Ultraman tried to make it big in Australia, it was great, but didn't quite land. Now, I do want to preface that much like Godzilla, when it comes to their American scene and pop culture, yeah, Ultraman was decently known. He had some of his original episodes from Ultraman dubbed in English and aired over here. You have a new little rendition of his original theme song. And then we had that kind of Ultraman USA, kind of, you know, like to kind of compare it to Godzilla's Hanna-Barbera show, right? It had Ultraman Beth, Scott, and Chuck. A little animation thing. Kind of cool, right? They tried something new, kind of like how we had Ultraman Junius early on of Japan, but as it stands, we didn't really get much of Ultraman in America, and I can kind of see why. This is all before the copyright stuff, mind you, with that one Thailand company, but story for another day. As it stands for Ultraman Powered, well, following Ultraman Great, they're both pretty similar shows in quality, but I might just give the slight edge to Ultraman Great. We're kind of doing something different, at least, I guess, different kaiju. Because when you get the Powered and you bring back old kaiju, I'm gonna measure them up to their original appearance, and just to put it blunt, the ferocity of the fights don't hold a candle. Like, I think beyond, you know, ragging on that Balton fight, look at Gamora in this series, right? With the main professor guy that's in the Gamora episode, he kind of gives a decent performance, right? He almost sells it, but the special effects don't really catch up to his emotion, right? I know a lot of these human cast in the show is a little, I'm not gonna say bare bones, but they try, right? They try. I like my 90s American like goofiness, so I like it a little bit. But the cast is just kind of there. Well, I like the captain, but in terms of an Ultraman protagonist, Kai just doesn't really do much. So with all this in mind, a lot of this is very surface level in terms of being similar to Godzilla. Like, sure, there may be big reptilian monsters, but that's kind of as far as it goes. Beyond, I really like Godzilla's roar. It's pretty, almost close to the Godzilla roar at some points. And I'll even say it, they screwed over Manila in the 98 film. Or Godzilla Jr. I was always more of a Manila fan, even to this day as I get older. There's something endearing about Manila, And then you look at this film, they have a bunch of little baby Zillas, and they're just stupid Raptor ripoffs. Like, sure, I have some figures of them, a bit nostalgic. Like I said, I do have nostalgia for this film, as I'm sure a lot of Godzilla fans do. And it's perfectly okay to like a film. Last thing you should be doing is listening to some guy on the internet. But I do like discussion, so I'm going to share my thoughts anyway. And when we look at this film, they kind of messed up Manila. They really did mess up Manila. And they messed up Godzilla himself. And even sure, the ending cliffhanger of having a Zilla egg survive leads us to a much better cartoon that we'll talk about later in the same video. But to stay on this little trajectory of my buddy Magma. As it stands in the pantheon of history, sure, Godzilla 98 technically wasn't the first American Godzilla outing, that being the Hanna-Barbera cartoon and Marvel Comics. And if you want to get really down to the roots, yeah, the 1956 version of Godzilla 54 and some of the other American cuts. So Godzilla's already has his own American incarnations, but this is the first legit one in a more mainstream setting, because apparently in America and other parts of the world, I might add, the biggest things of being mainstream or notable is when you have a big live-action film for some reason. And as it turns out, this would probably leave a stain on Godzilla history, at least kind of messing up the flow, and people always going, hey, it's not the Matthew Project film. And, if you're a Godzilla fan, then you know that things did get better with the Millennium era, and of course Godzilla 2000, which is perfection. I love Godzilla 2000. However, as an alien invader myself, I do find it quite weird that this big misunderstanding of Godzilla was such a misunderstanding. You'd think if you at least even saw the American cuts of the Showa-era films, or even the Raymond Burr version of Return of Godzilla of '85, and you at least understand that you want Godzilla to be big and intimidating. Even if he's gonna fight another monster, he's still gonna kick ass. Take the scene in Godzilla vs. Hedorah where he saves the day, but the military, the JSDF mind you, is still terrified of Godzilla. Or anything else like in Destroy All Monsters, where after they beat King Ghidorah, Godzilla still goes after the Keelak Mother base, because he's the guy. Hopefully that kind of paints a picture. Because sure, even in the 90s, maybe the Heisei era films didn't get distributed as, you know, since Return of Godzilla or Godzilla 85 was all they had up to that point, and that was in 85. Now we're back at 98, and sure, Godzilla really hasn't had a big staple in American culture, besides maybe being sadly mocked by the general audience, because if there's one thing about American critics, they're always snobby as fuck. Now, I want you to understand that, sure, we had Trendmasters and some very cool Dark Horse comics going on in the 90s, and both of those kind of had to handle more of some Trendmasters and adapting some of the 98 stuff in the toys, which is really cool. For instance, when I say I have nostalgia for this film, I mean it. Just look at this. I have a lot of 98 figures that I still love and hold dear to my heart, because again, why not? It's a monster movie. However, the thing is that, just in terms of completely misrepresenting a brand, or I don't want to say brand, but you know, an icon, Godzilla, and well, that's kind of the biggest shame of this film alone. Like, sure, we can take a pretty poor monster movie, I guess, but when you have the Godzilla name on it, then well, you're kind of asking for a fight, and that's what we got in Godzilla Final Wars, where Godzilla finally kills Zilla, and it's pretty cathartic. As you know, that's just Godzilla, he's gonna kill things. And what did I know about Godzilla killing things? He killed my predecessors of the Black Hole Planet 3 aliens. Magma, I really want you to talk about the nature of these characters in terms of American pop culture. I'm gonna refill on my drink. I like the designs of the team of Winter. I think the blue design of the shoulder pads looks nice. They kind of remind me of Stars from Resident Evil, you know, like that kind of G.I. Joe American look is pretty cool. I think it fits. I don't even mind them using Jeeps as their main attack vehicle on the ground. It kind of makes it, you know, decent for the setting. I like it. But as an Ultraman host, Kai might have a few moments here and there. I kind of like what he says, but it just doesn't really hit the mark. Now, I can understand Ultraman was still a pretty foreign concept even in the 90s in America. But, I'm just not the biggest fan of his portrayal as an Ultraman host. Maybe no shade against him as a person, right? I think, given what they had, with the tight production and the messiness of it all, and what was all lost in translation when adapting the show to an American audience, I can see why it was a pretty tall order to ask. Now, I am happy they brought Kai and his actor back for the two really great Ultra Galaxy fight series, that being the Destined Crossroads and Absolute Conspiracy, and Ultraman Regulus First Mission. Because why not, right? As of with Mugal, as he's talking about Zilla 98 in this episode, sure, we can always rag on their original appearance, but these shows, it did mean something for certain fans at some point, right? And they're gonna become fans after seeing these particular versions of the characters. So I can see why they have a cult following in a way, and bringing back Zilla and other Godzilla media like Rulers of Earth, and bringing back Ultraman Powered for an actual, like, character moment in these Ultra Galaxy fight series is really good. And here put him next to Ultraman Great and the USA trio from that animation I talked about. So I'm not just spieling about this. When looking at the history when these particular international Ultramen were created, well, it's cool as hell seeing them finally return and getting the proper due diligence years later. Like, look at the way they made Powered actually use his, like, shockwave hand palm attacks, and they even made his Space-Sim Ray, that Powered Space-Sim Ray, look even cooler. So I'll give credit my credits too, right? Getting to see all the international Ultramen team up with the newer guy, Ultraman Reboot, and Regulus is fantastic, right? Who am I to complain? Like, even if I rag on, if Mugal and I might rag on these interpretations and this particular analysis, it's still cool to see them pop up in some other form in the future, right? That's all I'll say on that. What do you look at that time refilled my drink? And I found another 98 figure to boot. This one's a lot smaller than we have this one. And like I showed you earlier, I got the bigger one. Give me a second. Here these two are. Look at that. This one's smaller. This is the bigger one. This is the smaller one. So, I believe that in terms of just Godzilla 98 as a whole, it's clear something with a lot of mistakes in it, and I don't just mean that to beat a dead horse. I mean, even looking back, there's still some Hollywood-isms that even permeate the MonsterVerse, such as kind of cutting away from the monsters, not really letting them have a spotlight, at least with Godzilla himself. Thank God for King Kong. But, like I said, when I mean Hollywood-isms, the kind of just westernization, one thing I thought that was kind of funny was if, just like in Hollywood right now, in 2025, right? In 98, there was that scene they have the old school giant octopus film, right? Stop motion. Playing on an old-fashioned TV as some guys are robbing the store. Then Zilla comes by down the street. You know, they have their mouths wide open. Like, these guys are like, you know, they saw a giant monster, right? Jurassic World Rebirth did something very similar, where they had one of the older dinosaur films on stop motion playing. I can't remember off the top of my head. I only saw Rebirth once, if it was The Lost World or even Valley of Gwangi, but I just thought it was kind of funny seeing that same trick played from the 90s. And I'm sure the writer of Jurassic World Rebirth, David Koepp, helped write, you know, the original two Jurassic Park films, which is something that Godzilla 98 was clearly riffing off of by making Godzilla more of a T-Rex and having raptors with the mini Zillas. Yeah, that's the kind of thing they're going for, I guess. Chasing trends, and you've seen the marketing campaign of having 98's foot step on a T-Rex skeleton at a New York museum. So clearly they're poking fun at Jurassic Park, or at the same time riding off the high tail since the Lost World Jurassic Park released just in 1997. So Hollywood still never changes and kind of following trends. I even heard that with Jurassic World Rebirth, they were trying to cut down a lot of scenes with like the Spinosaurus that were kind of going for more of a Godzilla feel or something of that nature. So I guess these things just kind of go round about like a clock, huh? Or a circus merry-go-round, whichever you prefer. But in terms of some of the Hollywoodisms still permeating the MonsterVerse, I don't really just mean stupid jokes, since that's always been a Hollywood thing, but it still kind of sticks like a sore thumb. I'll never forgive the MonsterVerse for that stupid gonorrhea joke. I mean, I love stupid humor myself. Look at me, I have a tinfoil hat on right now. But some things just really grate your ears, you know what I mean? Back to a lot of the jokes with the characters, whether it's Godzilla vs. Kong or the New Empire, with the only jokes that really I liked was the ones in Skull Island, the live action movie, not the anime. I can't believe the MonsterVerse had an anime. But these kind of Hollywoodisms still stick out with the Monarch show. One which still has a lot of dumb characters and just kind of annoying and grating on the ears. And really just doesn't want to focus on all that you're here to see. And all those Hollywoodisms kind of stick out with, well, a lot of American Godzilla projects, I hate to say it. And no, this isn't just kind of saying that, you know, because Toe's from Japan, their stuff is better, but it's mostly about what's focused on the material. A lot of Toho films at least give you the monster stuff, or have characters that are involved with them, and a lot of pretty low-key stuff you kind of have to rewatch a few times to really appreciate. Like your Return of Godzillas, or a lot of your Showa films and Millennium films, or even the Heisei era as well. A lot of things that if you just go back and check it out, you could appreciate them more when comparing them to the MonsterVerse and a lot of other Hollywood movies, whether it's like Transformers and the Michael Bay films, or even something like what's another example? The superhero movies. Yeah, let's do that one. A lot of superhero movies do the same thing that a lot of these Hollywood monster movies or sci-fi things do, where they don't really focus on what's at hand. They want to focus on stupid creating characters. They happen so much, like I said, that roundabout motion of the same things happening across 30 years, or even just going from the 90s till now. You're like, what the hell? I mean, I get it. A lot of these people probably went to the same film school, but come on. And then, just to go back to 98, we did get something a lot cooler with Godzilla the series. And let me show you something really cool. Here's a March-April 2000 release of, G-Fan magazine focusing on Godzilla the series. Look at that. As the Mecha-Godzilla creator myself, I'm quite happy to see some kind of cyborg Godzilla on the cover. Cyberzilla, if you will. Not quite Mecha-Godzilla, but I like it. Look at that. And if you go inside this whole magazine, you can find a lot of cool pages on this Godzilla series, the animated series. Yes, that's right. And I just feel like that. As a TV show, it's not bad. My good buddies at G-Force, like Kaiju Podcasts, have gone over pretty much every episode in really good detail. By pretty much, I mean like they focus entire podcast episodes of dissecting a few of these episodes at a time. So it's very thorough and very excellent. Go check it out. Now, I'm talking about Godzilla, the animated series. Sure, it may still be that Zilla character, and they give that, the Manoa or Godzilla Jr. some kind of green atomic breath. And I think that's kind of cool. And he uses the intelligence of his predecessor to outsmart a lot of his foes. And for the American Godzilla project, I think that's probably one of the better ones. Although, I used to love watching it more when I was a kid, and these days I got a lot of tokusatsu shows that I just enjoy more. But I love the art style in this animated series. Like, it's pure 90s goodness. It's fluid and looks really good most of the time. But I appreciate a lot of the monster designs, whether it's the C-Rex or the Crackler, or the giant war arm and the scorpion, and a lot of cool random mutations, like the one that can clone itself and it look like Godzilla, or Cyberzilla, of course. And I even like that giant rhino guy we got. A lot of cool random animals, really just giant upscale animals for most time. But the series does a pretty decent job giving us some new mutations. I always wish we had an actual video game. I used to have the Game Boy Advance for this 90s cartoon, but it was okay. Maybe not okay. I didn't really enjoy it that much. It was one of those weird handheld games. But as a kid, I always wanted a full-on game with the 90s animated series. I think there was some real potential for at least something kind of goofy. But as it stands, we didn't really get that. Instead, we just got a pretty decent show that spanned 2 seasons and kind of picked up with the movies and having pretty much all the movie characters there, except John Rito wasn't really there. He had another French hot chick setting in for him, but still a fun show. And then we had Alien Invaders, which brought in Cyberzilla. So of course, as an Alien Invader myself, good job on that. Although if you ask me who'd win in a fist fight, it'd definitely be my race against those weird aliens. We'd win, clearly. We like to drink more. Now, as it stands, yes, Godzilla the series has a pretty big cult following, and even the 1998 film does, and like I said, if you like that film, it's perfectly fine, right? I'm just saying in terms of American history overall of Godzilla, it definitely left a pretty bad spot. A lot of Millennium films had to make jokes about it, and then, Final Wars killed him off with Godzilla, but Zilla would return and rulers of Earth, and among some of those old cameos. And, even to this day, we've had lots of weird versions of Godzilla. But I still think that, even with that in mind, I'm not going to give Emmerich and Dean Devlin any credit, really. I don't think we should. Sure, I like the 90s aesthetic of this film, and like I said, some of the other soundtracks, like the score and the tie-in soundtrack, like the songs. I like Heroes by Wallflowers. That's an amazing cover. I used to watch that music video a lot as a kid. I think it was fantastic. Fantastic cover by Wallflower, Heroes. And another song I always liked was their Jamiroquai's Deeper Underground, right? That's a good one. And if you go through, I have the CD in my car from '98, right? So I still enjoy the CD. But a lot of good tie-in songs. I really like the Ben Folds song Air. The Binfolds 5 song, that's another good one I like. But if you look at the actual like film and its history, yeah, it was just pretty bad, but could have been a decent monster flick, and it kind of still is in some parts, like I said. Some of the action and scales are pretty cool. And I guess it's kind of funny, a lot of the Simpsons voice actors are in this movie, that's pretty cool. But as it stands, you know, I feel like this film, it could have even gotten more if it was going to be stupid. It could have been even dumber. I feel like it's not even as dumb as some of Emmerich's other films. But it's also not even really super fun as a weird Godzilla kind of knockoff thing. It's just kind of there in the end, which I think is a real shame. It could have been maybe a little bit more either way. But, you know, as it stands, Godzilla 98 has had a pretty recognizable spot in Godzilla's history, I guess. Yeah, you know, I guess if you're going to ask me, should they get credit for making Godzilla something else while, you know, future Toho versions would do weird things? Well, no, because future Toho versions, even the ones I'm not a big fan of, like Ultima, they still kind of fought back when they got attacked. And Zilla and the movie didn't really do that, and the TV show did it a bit better, I guess. You know, I guess it just kind of happens when you're the American Godzilla, the first live-action film that wasn't, you know, an edited cut from a Toho film. And you even had a 2-season animated series to your name and toys from the movie, and I wish Trendmasters got to make toys for the show. I know they were supposed to, that would have been cool, but all the other stuff in mind, I could see why it has a cult following, I do. I just think that when it comes to making an impression of what Godzilla's really all about, it didn't do a good job. And it's still taking the MonsterVerse some footing to find that, because the MonsterVerse, well, as a King Kong fan, there's so many cool nods in King Kong that incorporates it, does wonderfully. But films like 2014 I still like for its scale. And its soundtrack, oh boy, I'm saying that again, but Godzilla is just once again kind of in the background. And I know that's another one that's been talked ad nauseum about their human characters, but for me, I just think that it's one of those Hollywood films that, you know, had some cool set pieces in mind, just didn't really know how else to get there, and so the actual story is kind of meh. Then King of the Monsters, it gave us more monsters, but I just wasn't a big fan of how Rodan, Mothra, or King Ghidorah were handled beyond a few cool scenes with them. Without the overall story was just all over the place, and I felt like it was at odds with the more Hollywood aspects of it and the actual Godzilla material, forming something that doesn't really land on either aspects. But once again, I thought the soundtrack was pretty good. But then you have Godzilla vs. Kong and the New Empire, which I think kind of each film does something better than each other. But, you know, I still enjoy the fight scenes of that one, of course, and Mechagodzilla. Thank goodness for Mechagodzilla and Godzilla vs. Kong. But, you know, I just feel like at the end of the day, I hope the MonsterVerse really finds something, and Hollywood as a whole, and Toho, Hollywood and Toho, must find a good balance of Godzilla himself and his material, because I think even if films like -1 and Shin Godzilla and all the animes, they all do some great things, but I think if Godzilla in the vacuum finds a good balance between fun, action, good stories, intense metaphors, and all above, music, you know, set pieces, character designs, actors, and overall stories and what they mean in the modern day, I think both Toho and Hollywood can really make something better, and maybe, hey, I think if you brought Tokusatsu back with the budget of a Hollywood film, then you might find something really special. Now, when it comes to Ultraman Powered as just a show in of itself, I gotta say, probably the biggest crime in terms of just kind of having things mistranslated to the American audience is just that word. It's just that, well, Ultraman is supposed to be a sci-fi fantasy experience like any other. That's why he's still going on strong to this day alongside Godzilla, Tokusatsu at its finest. And I just think that from things like the city sets at nighttime not looking at all good in terms of scaling and their range, and actually buildings not looking the greatest, as well as overall fights. Like, I think that Gamora fight is still might be the worst fight in the entire Ultraman series, right? And the reason I'm talking about the Tokusatsu and Mugal is talking a lot about the effects of these characters, that's what we're really talking about. You can find other channels if you want a good analysis on like the humans. I mean, I would, but I just want to get to the nitty gritty, right? In terms of like the actual characters, this concept, these franchises, and how they appeal to an audience and our enjoyment. If you want a good analysis on like the actual like history and the production of Ultraman Powered, you can check out Tyrant Greg Haig's analysis. It's retrospect. I'll link it right here. But I think the Gamora fight is one of the worst things I've ever seen in a tokusatsu show. And it's a shame because, like I said, the suits look good and there's actual fight that was filmed outside, so the lighting is nice. But it's hardly a fight. I get it, Gamora in this universe, he was brought back to life as an ancient monster like usually, but he wasn't fit for this modern atmosphere's environment, which, I mean, whatever. But the fight, man, Powered hits him like twice, one kick and one shove, and he's just dead. This was supposed to be a somber moment, and maybe, but that's Gamora we're talking about, the monster prince himself, goddammit. And then you look at the Zeton fight, which is the Zeton fight is, wow, I don't think you can tell that Zeton was not made by the glorious alien bat. It was made by these weird Baltons. Sorry, we also, Mugal and I used to have a Balton as our roommate before we also kicked him out. Now, when looking at Zeton, he posed a decent threat. Like, I think Dorako was probably the real highlight of the series, even though he, somehow killed a Red King. He kind of got revenge for what happened in the Showa era. But Zeton just does this the entire time, and he's pretty cumbersome. And I just think the way that, like, we finally got to see Ultraman defeat Zeton besides, my guy, Ultraman Jack, the goat. But the way Power does it just feels so anticlimactic, then he just falls over and dies. I think the worst part is there's no real connection between Ultraman and his host. Power just separates himself from Kaya, so I get it, he wants to keep him safe, but a lot of the appeal of Ultraman is the big hoorah moment between Ultraman and his particular host, depending on the show, and them taking on the final opponent. A culmination of a particular series themes, if you will, with all the cool stuff being thrown in the finale to really make it a real highlight and memorable. Ultraman Powered, well, he beats Zeton and he just kind of dies. Then humans use a beta capsule, Powered's beta capsule, to defeat the Balton Empire with the help of two other random Ultramen from Power's brigade, I guess. But the thing that struck me most this time in a post-Shin Ultraman world is that they used the beta capsule to make a beam to hurt the final opponent, the Balton aliens. In Shin Ultraman, they used the beta technology to help Ultraman defeat Zeton, though I guess we'll give Powered some credit for that, right? Maybe in some weird broad strokes he was the first Shin Ultraman, besides Ultraman Jack, right? I think if you want to see another anniversary Ultraman, I would say, if you're curious, you can check out Powered, but just watch Return to Ultraman. That show is peak. Now, to go back to Powered, the way Ultraman just kind of leaves after he dies, he's picked up by his contemporary allies, just kind of awkward. Right, like that last shot we have of Ultraman, it's just his face in the red orb. It just looks really goofy. I just think as a whole, Ultraman Powered may have been kind of cool as a, hey, they made an Ultraman show in America, and nobody really talks about it. Like, sure. Or kind of like there was an Australian one and whatnot. But, I gotta say this. The show could have been really great if it was better communication, but I guess the show had the fall on his face. So if you get something like Ultraman Tiga, Dida, and Gaia, and Cosmos, and all the other cool guys coming pretty soon. So if anything, Ultraman Powered and great. I'm glad they brought it back in recent years because they look badass as hell. I'm always happy to see more obscure Ultraman return. Everybody deserves a spotlight. I just think that in the actual debout shows, well, at least we got Tika eventually. Maybe I'll talk about the Ultraman Neos and Ultra 721 in another video. But in terms of America, kind of like how we're talking about Godzilla 98, I get it. These are all foreign characters. Even if Japan's more popular than ever, things can still get lost in translation, and that applies to any foreign country, right? It can even be a European country. When you're translating a character to a new audience, a new culture, something's gonna be lost. Take it from me, an alien invader. Now, I just believe that Power could have worked with maybe a lot more energy, because Ultraman needs that energy to work. Really, the positivity, good human drama. Because Ultraman is for everybody, and I mean that in a good way. This series is full of emotions that appeal to adults and kids and everyone alike because they're just human. That's all you need to know. They're human stories about us standing against impossible conflicts. And sure, on paper and what little we get in the show, Powered still does that at least, kinda. But they kinda make Ultraman just some random sci-fi alien instead of a cool, true form of human. And I know Powered ends with a little thing that, there's a bit of Ultraman in all of us, which, that's kind of funny. This predates Godzilla 2000, which has a similar ending. But, you know, Godzilla 2000 made it more of an oof, did it much better in presentation. And Powered could have done that if the whole show was maybe building up to it a lot better. And try to do a little more than just rehashing the original 66 Ultraman for much worse results, right? Here's the thing. Sure, you can have cool designs and you can say it's American made, but if you just don't even have the energy of the original thing you're adapting, right? And the show is doing a strict adaptation, like directly, then of course you're going to get ridiculed and held up to that standard. Like, I know for Americans they might think Tokusatsu has been goofy all the way from the Showa era. I mean, you can think what you want, but if you ask me, I don't really care, because if it has good energy, and good production, and good scale, then that's what the Showa era is full of. Amazing stories, first for their genre, of course, and unique things that change pop culture forever. Not just Japan, but other countries like China and Thailand and Malaysia and everybody else that fell in love with Tokusatsu all around the world. And I just think that Power as a whole, compared to the original show, the fights were way more fast-paced back then in all the shows. And I just think that even though Power may have had better suit designs and maybe some funding or whatever, and, you know, the high benefit of hindsight now that they're adapting something that already exists, and, well, it just falls flat on its face. I just think it's kind of a collective, well, maybe they were doing it for the paycheck or they didn't know much about Ultraman and its concepts. But like I said, and like Mugal's been talking about, in terms of American history, Ultraman is still getting there, as well as Godzilla. Like, sure, the Monsterverse and -1 may have made Godzilla more popular than ever, although it feels like people still argue about what they want out of the franchise, and at least when it comes to Ultraman, and as a 2025 I'm happy fans still overall know what they want out of Ultraman. That's a good thing. I'm not talking about like perspectives or hot takes, like yada yada. I'm just talking about like, we all fall in love with these characters for a reason, and I think that I'm kind of glad Ultraman is staying as mostly a Japanese character. Now, Ultramanrising, he also looks like Powered, but I think he did it right in reintroducing Ultraman into American audiences, even though it wasn't a big theater release, just Netflix. And, you know, streaming usually kind of goes under the radar, but I still think Ultramanrising was a real standout, a real classic, I might add. I love it, and what I find interesting, though, is that Rising, although it was technically an American Ultraman, the show or that film kind of runs with it that you know something about Ultraman already, which I find fascinating. It didn't really introduce the character, it kind of just went with it that you know general Ultraman, like the concept, the tropes of a big guy fights monsters of a strike team, and it's a sci-fi world, and it was cool, you know, fantasy, sci-fi stuff, which I found fascinating, right? I think, let me show you. There's this old book I had by John LeMay. Here it is. This is the book by John LeMay. This is volume 2 of the big book of giant monster movies. It's been a few years since I read it, but I remember in this one he talks about Ultraman the Next. And I'm just saying that because he said something that I agree with. It's one of his books at least, that Ultraman the Next could be a good framework to introduce Ultraman to a wider American audience while still keeping what makes him a Japanese character, and that's the important part. There was also a press release from Tsuburaya Productions' recent president a few years ago. They talked about how they're not just going to send Ultraman to Hollywood and make some money, they want to keep him as a Japanese character. They don't want something to be lost in translation. And as much as the Alien and Magma-Boulder loves the Monsterverse films, there's still a little bit that was kind of lost of that Godzilla spark, even though I still really enjoy those films, you know what I mean? And I feel like they're doing the smart route with Ultraman, kind of keeping him, like you can still make him popular in America, but kind of do it your own true way. And I think that might be a more interesting route to take than how Toho did with Godzilla, right? Not saying which is better than the other, just kind of interesting to see if their new spot in American pop culture history. So we'll see where that goes. Really, I'm curious. I've been Alien and Magma-Boulder, but I just want to say thank you so much. Oh, Magma, I've got something for you. Let's play Gigabash. I'm picking Mechagodzilla. I see. Well, Mule, I'm not gonna say no to a fight. Let's play Gigabash. I'm picking Baltan. I see you've chosen Mecha Godzilla. That's fine. Of course you did. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. I got this from Alien Bat. Why isn't that working? Come on, it's lagging. I've got lag. Oh, come on, Magma. This is gonna stupid monkey. Today, at least. Go. We'll see who really has the worst American vision. Alright, actually, you know what? That's not gonna work. They both gotta suck. You and your damn black hole planetary technology. Come on. Come on, Magma. That's all you got. Take that. Come on. Come on. Oh. Go. Give me a second. How does it feel, Magma? Brutal. Hate that guy. Well, I've been Mugal the III, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, or else. And please watch our other videos, we got more coming. I have superior technology.